A lot of times in divorce, we get scared or, fear of making the wrong decision or whatever, and we make no decision.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that can be worse than,
right,
making
yeah.
a decision and going with it. So
Sometimes you got to be decisive. You got to actually start out on a path and be willing to be wrong.
successful people make decisions very quickly and change their decisions very slowly, if at all. And people who are, who tend to make decisions slower or tend to avoid decision making or whatever, as a general rule, tend to be less successful people.
Right.
And so, that's kind of the concept that I'm going to talk about a little bit in this. And I think that, again, going back to the Think and Grow Rich, the decision making is a component of the overall path that you're on, and the overall path that you're on is determined by, what do you want? What are your goals?
Yeah.
What's your vision? Where are you going? That's a lot of times where people get stuck in divorce is they have so much fear around, should I keep the house or shouldn't I keep the house? Well, should we have
should I move out? Shouldn't I move out?
Yeah. Should we have a 50-50 parenting plan? Should we have an 80-20 parenting plan? Should I go back to work and get a job, or should I wait till the divorce is over? Every family is unique, and the individuals within the family are unique. And it's not as simple as just, what's the law? Should I or shouldn't I? There's so many intangibles that go into decision making in divorce.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of times what I personally see many, many lawyers lose sight of is the fact that there are a lot of intangible considerations.
Yeah.
And what we always tell people is, as long as you establish a parenting schedule when you move out, it's not going to hurt you, from the custody perspective. It's not going to hurt you.
And what's your argument to the judge? Well, I stayed put so I could keep a favorable status quo. Or is it, what hurts the children the most is the conflict.
Right.
So I'm going to move out. And, I think that's a good argument.
Right.
If at least in our courts,
right,
that you were willing to take the high road, so to speak, and avoid the conflict. But avoiding conflict is kind of a higher principle.
Yes.
But most people, they can't get past how do I win the case.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a lower principle.
Right.
So what we want to do when first of all, when we decide to get a divorce, I tell all my coaching clients that you have to think about what you want your life to look like in the future. You just have to. People
very much in the beginning sort of get stuck on, if I give A, can I get B in return? That's one of the sort of paradigms that they have is if I give A, can I get B? And then the other thing that they do is they get focused on, sometimes in more angry or flared up situations. I don't think the person we were talking to yesterday is at that level of anger or resentment. But when you hit a certain level of anger or resentment, a lot of people become very focused on how will this impact the other person.
Right.
That decision making starts coming from your emotions.
I would say more than half.
Yeah. And this is very, very common in divorce. Mm-hmm. This is something that if you're in business or anything like that, the first thing they're going to tell you and teach you, I have an MBA, I have a business background. Mm-hmm. The first thing that you're going to learn is don't bring your emotions, don't bring your bias into negotiations.
Right.
And
True.
That's the problem in divorce for most people is they're trying to conduct these what are now business transactions between the two people who used to be, married or partners or whatever. And they aren't, they're bringing all of the previous, emotions and resentment and anger into it.
Right.
And when you start doing that, your decisions start coming from a point of how is this going to advantage or disadvantage the other person, and I'm going to make my choices based on that.
Right. And some people they go all the way to their deathbed with
That's
this.
right. And the problem with that is that the person that you end up hurting is yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're not making the decisions from the perspective of just you. I mean, you should be the only consideration at this point, right? You're getting a divorce. I'm getting a divorce because I don't want to have to consider the other person.
Yeah, well, at least, I don't know if you should be the only consideration, but certainly trying to get a just what consequence is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
In other words, we're a lot of times when we feel like we've been slighted or treated unjustly, we want to see that person get their comeuppance.
Right.
And so we're all focused on seeing that person get their comeuppance.
Right.
And we're not in control of whether they get their comeuppance.
Right.
I mean, what if they don't get their comeuppance, but we have but we get a house in Salt Creek? You know?
That's always his default, because Salt Creek is like one of my favorite places on earth. So
if
it's in Orange County, by the way.
If we're doing fantastic and they're doing well,
right,
we're better off than if both of us are doing poorly.
Right, and then if we're both miserable. It's amazing how you come up with a really creative solution that will help both people, and one of the people doesn't want to do it just because there's some benefit to the other person.
Right, and I'm writing a course right now, and someday it'll be finished. But but the opening lessons are you've started down this road to divorce because you want to be happy.
Right.
You're unhappy in your marriage, so you're getting divorced to be happy.
Right.
Or your spouse is doing this and you're getting this against his will, but you still want to be happy.
Right.
And so sit down with pen and paper and write down, what is it that makes you happy? The anger and emotions of divorce tend to knock us off our goals.
Right. Right. And I think that, one, you have to get clear on your vision, and writing it is a great way to do that. And number two, you have to be able to set your emotions aside. And if you can't set your emotions aside, you need to get a coach. You need to find someone close to you who doesn't, have a dog in the fight. And I find that people tend to ask friends and family, and there's a difference between somebody being on your side or being an advocate for you, which is kind of what an attorney does, versus somebody being emotionally invested. So your mom is probably, if your ex, had an affair, did something like that, or whatever the circumstance is, your parent is probably not going to be your ex's biggest fan. So asking your parent to prove something for non-emotion probably not going to have a good outcome, because they have emotion around you being hurt. There's all these type of really critical level decisions that people are trying to make, and you get exhausted. And we always tell people a good thing to do is to make a decision and then sit with it for a little bit. Be it a day, a week, whatever you have the ability to wait, and then come back to it and revisit it. Sit down and write out your decision, write out your thoughts around it, your emotions, and then come back to it. Because this situation's very fluid, and sometimes emotions are changing on a daily basis. And you may come back in a week and look at that and think, what was I thinking? Why was I thinking that was the best choice?
Yeah.
Decisions in divorce are tough, and they come quickly, and they are critical. So my advice, get a coach, get into therapy, do something. Thomas and I do coaching. You can always reach out to us, but you need somebody who doesn't have a dog in the fight, so to speak, to help you navigate your way through this sometimes.